What if I told you that the darkest parts of your mind, those whispers you silence, those shadows you avoid, are actually the keys to your greatest power? Most people spend their lives running from what they fear inside themselves, hoping that if they pretend long enough, the monsters will disappear. But what if those monsters aren't enemies at all? Imagine standing at the edge of a mirror that doesn't show your face, but everything you hide from the world. And worse, from yourself. Sounds terrifying, right? Yet within that terror lies the truth no one dares to discuss, the hidden engine behind every act of self-sabotage, failure, or sudden rage. Now here's a curveball. What if your worst traits are just your best traits in disguise, waiting for you to claim them? You might laugh and say, "Oh great, so my procrastination is a superpower now." But stay with me, because once you understand this one buried truth about human nature, you'll never see yourself or anyone else the same way again. But be warned, once it's seen, it can't be unseen. The shadow self is not a myth, nor is it a poetic metaphor. It's a psychological truth that most people live with every single day, often without realizing it. It's the side of us we've been taught to hide, suppress, or deny. Think of the moments when you say, "I don't know why I did that," or "That's not like me." Those are moments when the shadow leaks out. It's not just a collection of bad habits or impulsive thoughts. It's the raw, unfiltered part of our personality that has been buried because it didn't meet the expectations of society, family, or even ourselves. It includes our envy, lust, rage, pride, laziness, but also our deepest cravings for love, validation, dominance, freedom, and control. These are not things we consciously suppress with malicious intent, but rather aspects of ourselves we learn to push down for survival. In childhood, when we expressed certain emotions and were punished, shamed, or rejected, our minds created a survival response: bury it. That act of psychological burial forms the shadow, and it doesn't disappear, it just goes underground. The terrifying truth is that the shadow self doesn't stay buried forever. It emerges in subtle and often destructive ways, through passive-aggressive behavior, sudden outbursts, addictions, emotional numbness, and unhealthy relationships. We like to think we are in control, that we act with intention, but the shadow proves otherwise. It is a puppet master in the dark, pulling strings we cannot see. A person might pride themselves on being kind and generous, yet find themselves secretly resentful and bitter. Another might be known for their humility while battling a deep, unspoken need to be admired or superior. These contradictions don't mean we are fake. They mean we are fragmented, and that fragmentation is what keeps us stuck. The danger isn't in having a shadow. The danger is in pretending we don't. When we fail to acknowledge our shadow, we begin projecting it onto others. That's why we see people accusing others of arrogance while secretly feeling superior themselves. It's why someone might call another lazy while silently avoiding their own responsibilities. Projection is the mind's way of deflecting the pain of looking inward. But the cost of that deflection is steep: broken relationships, internal conflict, and a false sense of identity. The irony is that the parts of others we find most annoying or offensive are often reflections of our own disowned traits. We hate what we are afraid of becoming, and so we judge, condemn, and avoid, not realizing that in doing so, we're running from ourselves. But the shadow is not only about negativity. That's the part most people misunderstand. It also contains positive traits we've rejected: our assertiveness, our creativity, our sensuality, our wildness. Perhaps you were taught that being confident is arrogant, so you suppressed your natural ability to lead. Or maybe you were told that being emotional is weak, so you learned to disconnect from your feelings. All of these lost parts go into the shadow, and without them, we feel incomplete. We become people-pleasers, perfectionists, overachievers, or victims, not because that's who we are, but because we're performing the role of who we think we should be. The path to reclaiming power begins with awareness, not judgment, not guilt, not shame, just honest observation. When you feel a strong emotional reaction, pause and ask, what part of me is being triggered? What am I trying not to feel right now? Most people don't ask these questions because the answers can be uncomfortable. But those uncomfortable answers are exactly where growth lives. The more we explore the shadow, the more we realize it isn't a monster, it's a messenger. It's trying to show us what we've lost, what we've ignored, and what we truly need to become whole. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean acting on every dark impulse. It means recognizing them, understanding where they come from, and making conscious choices. It's about meeting yourself with radical honesty and saying, yes, I feel jealousy. Yes, I crave attention. Yes, I've been angry and spiteful, but I'm also capable of compassion, depth, and love. This internal reconciliation is not easy. It demands courage, but it also brings a kind of freedom that surface-level positivity can never offer. Because when you stop hiding from your shadow, you stop fearing it. And when you stop fearing it, you stop letting it control you. People spend their entire lives trying to be good, trying to avoid mistakes, trying to win approval, only to end up exhausted, disconnected, and empty. That's because they've built a life on only half of who they are. The other half, the shadow, is locked away, whispering, screaming, begging to be seen. And as long as that part remains unseen, we stay fragmented. We keep chasing external validation instead of internal peace. But peace doesn't come from pretending we're perfect. It comes from embracing that we're not and that we don't have to be. The shadow self isn't the enemy, it's the doorway. And every time we deny it, we're closing the door on our own liberation. Denying the dark aspects of our nature is not just a matter of ignorance, it's a psychological defense mechanism that eventually turns against us. When we refuse to acknowledge the parts of ourselves that are angry, envious, manipulative, or insecure, we don't make them disappear. We simply drive them underground, into the unconscious mind where they grow in strength and complexity. These suppressed traits and emotions begin to seep out in unrecognizable and destructive ways. One of the most common outcomes of this denial is projection. Projection occurs when we unconsciously attribute our unwanted thoughts, feelings, or motivations to others. Instead of recognizing the envy we feel toward a successful friend, we label them as arrogant or showy. Instead of admitting our own desire for control, we accuse others of being controlling. In doing this, we shift our inner tension outward, believing the problem lies with someone else, when in fact it lies within us. This psychological mirroring distorts reality and fractures relationships. People begin to see enemies where there are none, conflicts where there is misunderstanding, and flaws in others that are simply reflections of their own unacknowledged shadows. Projection allows the ego to maintain its illusion of purity and control, but it does so at a great cost. It damages trust, breeds resentment, and creates emotional distance. The more we deny our inner darkness, the more reactive we become to others. We get triggered by behaviors that mirror our own unconscious tendencies, and rather than pausing to reflect, we lash out, justify, or isolate. This process repeats itself until it becomes a cycle of emotional chaos, confusion, and disconnection. Self-sabotage is another insidious result of shadow denial. When we fail to integrate our darker impulses and fears, they manifest as inner resistance to success, intimacy, or change. You may find yourself procrastinating on a dream you care deeply about, not because you're lazy, but because a hidden part of you fears failure, or perhaps fears what success might demand from you. You may continually attract toxic partners or sabotage healthy relationships, not because you don't want love, but because you carry unresolved wounds around trust, worthiness, or vulnerability. The sabotage is not conscious, it's the shadow at work, protecting you in the only way it knows how, by keeping you small, hidden, and within familiar discomfort. The tragedy is that many people interpret this inner sabotage as evidence that they are broken or weak, when in truth, it's the result of a disowned part of the self trying to be heard. This fragmentation leads to internal conflict and emotional volatility. The more we try to suppress our darkness, the louder it becomes. Like trying to hold a beach ball underwater, our hidden emotions eventually burst to the surface, often at the worst possible moments. An argument escalates into a full-blown explosion. A mild disappointment triggers a deep spiral into shame or self-loathing. These emotional outbursts may feel irrational, but they're actually long-suppressed feelings finally breaking free. They aren't irrational, they're unresolved. The chaos isn't random, it's rooted in the mind's desperate attempt to bring attention to what's been ignored. This is why personal growth requires more than surface-level positivity or affirmations. It requires a deep dive into the parts of ourselves we would rather avoid. And yet, culture doesn't encourage this kind of self-honesty. We are conditioned to present only the best versions of ourselves, to be likable, agreeable, and admirable. Social media reinforces this by rewarding curated perfection and punishing vulnerability. In such an environment, shadow traits are pushed even further into hiding, and the pressure to maintain a flawless image becomes suffocating. Underneath that performance is a boiling pressure cooker of unacknowledged feelings: anger, sadness, resentment, fear, waiting to erupt. When those emotions do emerge, they often come out sideways: sarcasm instead of honesty, passive aggression instead of confrontation, self-harm instead of self-expression. The chaos created by denying the shadow doesn't only affect the individual, it ripples outward into families, communities, and even societies. Parents who never confront their own pain often pass it on to their children, not through direct intention, but through modeling, projection, and emotional unavailability. Leaders who suppress their insecurities often compensate by seeking control, power, or dominance over others. These unintegrated shadows at the collective level create cultures of blame, fear, division, and emotional repression. The inability to look inward fuels a world obsessed with changing what's outside, while ignoring the turmoil within. To break free from this spiral, one must be willing to face what they fear most. Not the monsters in the world, but the ones within. That requires immense courage and humility. It's not about becoming perfect or eradicating all negative traits. It's about owning them, understanding them, and making peace with their existence. The paradox is that by embracing our darkness, we actually gain more control over our actions, more compassion for others, and more clarity in our decisions. We stop being run by unconscious patterns and start living from conscious choice. We no longer need to project our pain onto others or sabotage our potential. Instead, we begin to feel a deeper sense of wholeness, rooted not in the illusion of flawlessness, but in the truth of our complexity. True transformation does not begin with external change. It begins with a bold, uncomfortable, and often painful journey inward. It begins when we stop running from the parts of ourselves we've labeled as bad, broken, or unacceptable. Most people live their entire lives avoiding their inner darkness, hoping that by ignoring it, it will simply go away. But it never does. It waits. It waits beneath the surface of every smile, behind every compulsive habit, and inside every relationship that feels just a little too familiar in its dysfunction. These hidden parts of us, our fear, rage, envy, shame, and grief, do not vanish with time or positive thinking. They dig in deeper, influencing our decisions, our reactions, and our perception of the world around us. The longer we deny them, the more power they gain. But the moment we turn toward them, everything begins to change. Confrontation is the first step. And confrontation doesn't mean waging war. It means facing what we've been unwilling to look at. That insecurity you've been covering with bravado, that sadness you've numbed with distractions, that jealousy you've hidden behind fake support, those are the parts that demand your attention. Not because they want to destroy you, but because they've been exiled from your awareness for so long. Every emotion you suppress becomes an orphaned part of your psyche, and those orphans don't disappear, they haunt you. They show up in your relationships as defensiveness, in your career as hesitation, in your self-image as self-doubt. You may wonder why certain patterns keep repeating in your life, why you attract the same kind of people, or why certain emotions come in waves that feel unmanageable. It's not random. It's the unacknowledged seeking recognition. Integration is what happens after the confrontation. It's the process of sitting with those parts and saying, I see you, I hear you, you belong here too. This is not the same as giving in to harmful behavior or indulging in negativity. It's about recognizing the origin of these traits and understanding their purpose. Many of the behaviors we hate in ourselves were, at one point, survival strategies. That critical voice in your head may have been your way of avoiding rejection. That tendency to withdraw may have protected you from emotional pain. That anger you carry may have once been your only defense against feeling powerless. Integration means honoring the role these parts played in keeping you safe, while also gently inviting them into a more conscious, balanced existence. This process is not linear. It is not clean or easy. It can be deeply uncomfortable to look in the mirror and admit that you are not only the things you're proud of, but also the things you're ashamed of. That within you exists the potential for both incredible light and terrifying darkness. But here lies the secret that no one talks about. Wholeness is more powerful than goodness. Trying to be good often turns into a performance, a mask you wear to avoid rejection or criticism. But wholeness, that's real. Wholeness means owning all of you, not just the socially acceptable, polished parts, but also the messy, complicated, raw parts. It means standing in your truth and saying, I am all of this, and I am still worthy of love. Acceptance is the final step. But it's not about resignation, it's about recognition. It's about no longer needing to fix or hide who you are. When you accept the parts of yourself you used to fear, they stop controlling you. Fear loses its grip. You stop reacting from a place of trauma and start responding from a place of clarity. You become less triggered, more grounded, more open. You no longer need others to validate your worth because you've already reclaimed it from the darkest corners of your being. Acceptance doesn't mean you'll never struggle again. It means that struggle no longer defines you. You don't collapse under it. You learn to move with it, through it, beyond it. What most people call transformation is often just surface-level change, new habits, new routines, new appearances. But true transformation is internal. It shifts the foundation of your identity. It changes the way you speak to yourself, the way you interpret life, the way you show up in the world. And it all begins when you are brave enough to sit with the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. The moment you stop resisting them, they stop being enemies. They become allies. They become sources of insight, intuition, and even strength. The anger becomes assertiveness. The fear becomes caution and wisdom. The shame becomes compassion. Every part of you that you feared begins to soften, not because it disappears, but because it's no longer being held in isolation. It becomes part of the whole. This is the path to true freedom, not by escaping yourself, but by coming home to yourself completely. When you embrace your whole self, you stop living in reaction to the world. You start creating from a place of truth. You stop needing masks, roles, and facades. You live in alignment. You speak with authenticity. You love with depth. You lead with integrity. You no longer fear being exposed because there is nothing left to hide. Most people avoid shadow work because it forces them to face the very things they've been running from their entire lives. It's not just painful, it's terrifying. It means pulling back the curtain on the parts of yourself you've hidden, denied, or buried deep beneath layers of distraction, denial, and self-deception. It means admitting that the version of yourself you present to the world is incomplete, carefully crafted, and sometimes a lie. That's not an easy truth to swallow. Society has trained us to associate discomfort with danger, and so we naturally retreat from anything that feels emotionally heavy, raw, or threatening to our ego. Shadow work feels like opening a door to a room you've kept locked for years, afraid of what you might find. And yet, behind that door lies everything you've been looking for: your strength, your clarity, your true voice, your freedom. The shadow is not inherently evil or broken. It is simply unknown. It contains all the parts of you that have been judged, rejected, or misunderstood. by your parents, your peers, your culture, and eventually by yourself. It's made up of the emotions you weren't allowed to express, the desires you were told were wrong, the thoughts that made you feel guilty, and the traits you felt would make you unlovable. When these parts are repressed, they don't vanish. They become unconscious patterns that sabotage your goals, influence your relationships, and cloud your self-perception. You might find yourself lashing out, withdrawing, judging others harshly, or sabotaging your own progress, all without fully understanding why. That confusion is the voice of the shadow speaking in a language you haven't yet learned to decode. Avoiding shadow work doesn't eliminate the shadow, it strengthens it. What we resist persists. The more we pretend we're fine, the more the unresolved pain festers beneath the surface. And it doesn't stay quiet. It shows up in the form of anxiety, depression, addiction, burnout, and emotional numbness. It whispers in moments of silence and screams in moments of crisis. People often wonder why they feel stuck or lost, even when everything on the outside looks good. It's because they're living from a fractured identity, one that excludes half of who they really are. The more we deny our darkness, the more disconnected we become from our inner power, and the more disconnected we are, the more we rely on external validation to feel okay. That's a trap. True power comes from within, not from approval, applause, or achievement. Shadow work demands honesty. The kind of honesty that strips away excuses and exposes the raw truth. It asks you to own your jealousy instead of masking it with fake positivity. It asks you to acknowledge your anger instead of pretending to be endlessly patient. It forces you to recognize the fear beneath your confidence, the pride beneath your humility, the pain beneath your perfectionism. And in doing so, it offers something extraordinary: self-awareness. When you begin to see yourself clearly, you begin to reclaim the parts of you that you gave away for acceptance or survival. You begin to feel whole again, and wholeness is where freedom lives. Personal power doesn't come from being flawless. It comes from being integrated. When you've made peace with your shadow, you become less reactive, less defensive, less fragile. You no longer need to prove your worth because you know who you are beyond the roles you play or the masks you wear. You can show up authentically, speak truthfully, and act with conviction because you're no longer at war with yourself. You stop fearing failure, judgment, or rejection because those fears lose their grip once you've faced the parts of you they were feeding on. The power that emerges from shadow work is not aggressive or dominating. It's quiet, grounded, and unshakable. It's the kind of power that doesn't need to be announced because it's felt. Freedom, too, takes on a new meaning. It's no longer about escaping discomfort or chasing constant happiness. It becomes the ability to be fully present with whatever arises: joy, grief, confusion, anger, without being consumed by it. When you've befriended your shadow, life stops feeling like a performance. You're no longer trying to curate the perfect version of yourself for others to accept. You're no longer held hostage by your past or enslaved by your patterns. You have choices. You can respond instead of react. You can love without losing yourself. You can create without needing approval. You can rest without feeling guilty. That's what emotional freedom looks like. It's not the absence of struggle, but the presence of inner alignment. But all of this requires courage, the courage to feel what you've been avoiding, to question what you've believed, and to face who you've become. Most people avoid shadow work because it doesn't offer quick fixes or instant gratification. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. It happens in the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts, peeling back the layers of your identity and asking, who am I beneath all of this? It's messy, often lonely and deeply uncomfortable, but it's also sacred, because in that darkness you find light, not the light of perfection or purity, but the light of truth. And that light is what leads to transformation, not just in how you feel, but in how you live.